And now it's a real honor to introduce Jonny Bauer. Jonny is the Global Chief Creative Officer at Droga5. Droga5, of course, is a wild agency. It's only 10 years old. Jonny's responsible for creative across all platforms. How appropriate given the work that we're unveiling today. In 2011, he was inducted into the American Advertising Federation Hall of Fame, Hall of Achievement. In 2015, the Effie's named Droga5 the most effective independent marketing agency. And this year, just recently, Ad Age has named Droga5 Agency of the Year. Jonny is going to speak about creativity and measurement and values, and you're just so lucky to hear him speak. His predilections and personality runs from interesting haircuts to renovating houses. He's going to dazzle you with some art and some science, so please welcome Jonny Bauer.
Are you ready for a new sensation?
Very kind, thank you. Morning. I'm Jonny Bauer. Thanks for the really kind and generous introduction, Gail, and thank you for the Australian music for me to come up to. A nice touch. I'm here. I'm the strategy lead at Droga5, so I am connected to the strategy, but also a lot of the measurement that goes into our work. And I'm going to talk a little bit today about measuring influence. And influence is a key word that we use every day, all the time at Droga5. And I'm going to talk about how I think my key message today is that metrics shouldn't just measure, they should inspire creativity and inspire action. And we're going to talk a little bit today about how I have a lot of work to get through, so I'm going to be going through it quite a click, and hopefully have a little bit of time for questions at the end. Just a quick word on Droga5 for those who don't know. This is the composition of all of the people that work at Droga5. We care the most about creative, but it's rooted in clearly defined and measured strategy. We don't have a digital department, and we're humanity obsessed, which means we just want to create advertising that adds value rather than clutter. We work in an industry where there are technologies to actually help you avoid what we create. That's very humbling, so we try and create things that people actually want. What I'm going to talk a little bit today is around this word influence. When people come to talk to us, the first thing that we mention is that our goal is effectiveness. Nothing means anything unless the work works. How we get to effectiveness is through this idea of influence. And we define influence by the capacity or power to be a compelling force, to create things that people simply want and would welcome into their life. And our purpose, and we'll go into some of the case studies that I'm going to take you through today, we root brands in clearly defined purposes, but Droga5's purpose is to help build and sustain the most influential businesses and brands of the 21st century. Specifically for this talk, we're going to get into what an influence metric is, because we typically measure things, what's the business metric and what's the brand metric, but we like to inspire creativity and action through this idea of an influence metric. And we define that as what do we want to change in the real world, not just on an advertising tracker? What is something that goes beyond any business or brand metric that inspires people to do something? And this is the influence metric is printed out and held on the desks of everyone working on this piece of business to say, what real world impact are we going to have? So I'm going to quickly take you through some case studies, take you through the business and brand metrics, but then touch on what the influence metric was and the work that came off it. Okay, so Prudential. This is the longest of the videos. This takes you through a 5-year history of the work that we've done with Prudential, which was a dusty financial services company that people thought just sold insurance primarily, but did so much more and wanted to get its voice out into the world. And of course, the business metric was to sell more Prudential products, and the brand metrics were all around innovation. How can we be seen as modern and not bookish? But the influence metric that has been the center of all the work that we've done is, will there be more money in retirement accounts? And more than 60% of Americans have less than $38,000 in their banks at the time of retirement. And that is a scary fact. We've rooted the brand in a purpose to make America financially smarter, but the way that we will measure that is if there is actually indeed more people have more money at the time of retirement. So this is just some work where that influence metric was the guiding light.
Time went by really fast. It goes by too fast.
I don't know how much money I need, but I know that whatever I have, that's what I'm going to live within.
Our generation is facing a new retirement challenge. We're living longer, but we're less prepared than ever before. And how's the industry responding? By showing retirement as yachts, vacation homes, and salt and pepper models. We decided to do something dramatically different. An ambitious 5-year mission for Prudential to make America financially smarter. And the first step in being smarter is to give people a more honest picture of retirement. So we set out to find the real face of retirement. First, we asked people to document their first day of retirement. The thousands of photos we received became the core of the Day One website. Then, we visited 20 Americans on their own day ones. They shared their struggles, experiences, and wisdom.
It's kind of hard to make decisions by yourself all of a sudden when you've been making them with somebody else for 35 years.
Once we'd established a more honest view of retirement, our next chapter of becoming smarter was to find out why aren't we better prepared. It turned out that the answer lied in an unexpected place.
We have a brain that was evolved in a very different time. It was never designed to think about tomorrow because for our ancestors, there weren't that many tomorrows to think about.
So we created the Challenge Lab, a vast archive of over 150 unique pieces of content. Films, experiments, expert articles, facts, games, and one-of-a-kind interactive tools to show how our brain can get in the way of planning for the future and what we can do to outsmart it.
Thank you!
On television, the Challenge Lab came to life with original experiments conducted by Harvard professor Daniel Gilbert.
How much money do you think you'll need when you retire? That retirement challenge might not seem so big after all.
But we had to do more than educate people to save for retirement. We had to inspire them to imagine what retirement could be. That's why we created Chapter 2, a first-of-its-kind campaign to show everyone that retirement is no longer a time to do nothing. It's the time to do what you love. And what better way to prove this than to let retirees create the campaign themselves? Our film was directed by a retired postal worker, produced by a retired business executive, and scored by a retired IT director. We even helped a retired real estate agent design an original dress for Naomi Watts to wear at the Cannes Film Festival. Chapter 2 gave people hope for what their retirements could be. But we still had to get people to actually start saving today. To do that, we wanted to show that it only takes a small change to notice a big difference. Even 1% more can help. So how can we teach people that? We went to the nation's capital and we put on a race. Yep, a 4.01k for your 401k. And instead of asking people to give money to a charity, this race asked everyone to save an additional 1% for their retirement. Soon, runners across the country were joining in. Over 50,000 ran, and over 28,000 people have already taken the 1% more pledge. Collectively,
So I'm going to stop it there. The video does get on, but I'm conscious of the time that we have left. So just coming at it from so many different angles, but with this question in mind, what's going to actually get people to put more money into their bank, rather than what will make a nice television commercial? What is going to actually inspire action? The examples that I have today are in very different categories with different levels of involvement, and we're shifting to order, where Toyota launched late last year a hydrogen-powered car, a fuel cell vehicle. And it became quite an interesting challenge because essentially you're selling a $60,000 car that looks pretty close to a Camry, with no infrastructure that people believe if you have an accident, you will explode. And at the same time, with the launch of the Prius so many years ago, they'd lost alternative fuel leadership position. So how do we reignite that? When thinking about what the influence metric is, it went beyond the car, but went to a new type of fuel. And we were trying to make hydrogen feel like the no-brainer future of human propulsion. That became the influence metric. That's what we measure the success around. So the first thing that we did was to launch, and that influence metric actually inspired the broader idea of this idea called the turning point. This is the launch film.
Over the next year, we'll be faced with a decision to support, oppose, or even ignore the future of hydrogen-fueled propulsion. While there's no doubt that the need for an alternative to fossil fuel is real, the debate around hydrogen will intensify. There will be the naysayers, the handbrakes who say that it can't be done, that it's unsafe, that there's no infrastructure to support it. Then there'll be the trailblazers, the first to put up their hand and put down their foot. The bold few, driven to be remembered as those who made a difference, and perhaps the ones who made all the difference. So, as we travel down this hydrogen-paved highway, ready to mark a turning point in history, the question isn't if you'll turn, it's when.
So tapping into the inevitability, but also we needed to tap into the abundance of hydrogen as we created this.
Toyota's most important launch in over 20 years was the Toyota Mirai, a car that runs on hydrogen. But the skeptics were ruthless.
Certain technologies like fuel cell, and it's like, oh god, fuel cell is so bullshit.
And you know what? He's right. Hydrogen is bullshit. In fact, hydrogen is everywhere. It's the most abundant element in the universe. So we created Fueled by Everything, a year-long scientific quest to fuel the Toyota Mirai with anything we could find, even bullshit.
And all of this manure has hydrogen in it. Let's see if we can get a car to really run on bullshit.
We then went back to where the fuel industry first began, this time taking water instead of oil.
To bring it back here to Titusville, where we started the oil industry, it's a proud moment.
And it turned out there's even hydrogen in America's two favorite things, kids and lemonade. Though our lawyers advised us to stick to the lemonade.
National Lemonade Day, and did you know you will soon be able to use it to power your car?
And finally, we launched the car with one more source.
October 21st, 2015, the day that Marty McFly arrived in the future. Toyota is commemorating that with a new ad.
To help it introduce this hydrogen-fueled car called the Mirai.
Like Doc Brown predicted over 30 years ago, we showed how trash can now power a car. We not just became the #1 trending video, but the #1 trending topic on Twitter and Facebook, even above Back to the Future Day itself. The total campaign, supported by the country's top engineers showing the science behind it all, received a total of 1.9 billion earned media impressions. That's an ad value of $8 million. While pre-order goals were surpassed by 400%. But most importantly, we changed mainstream perception of hydrogen from being a chemical element to be feared into a viable and exciting fuel source for our future.
We're driving down the road, running on bullshit.
So real-world influence, real-world impact, that became the metric that we hoped to move, which then helped realize both the business and brand metrics. I'm conscious of the time and the length of these videos, so we're going to skip through the Johnsonville one and talk about Newcastle as well, Newcastle Brown Ale, a Heineken brand. Here, this is different. We're not about changing people's lives in the same way that financial services or propulsion are, but they're really squeezed from a business perspective. They're too big to be a craft brand and too small to compete against the Budweisers of the world, spending literally 50 or 60 times their spend. And their brand metric was around relatability. No one was connecting this brand to feel like it was a brand for them. The other thing that we found is that people really hate beer advertising. They find it really, really unrelatable. They're told they either need to be the most interesting man in the world or they need to be some sort of sophomoric dunce, and they just weren't able to see themselves in any of the brand's advertising on television. So for us, when we started to think about what our influence metric is, we expect people to demand more from beer advertising and not treat people in such an obvious and silly way. So created a strategy and a campaign rooted around this influence metric to call out all of the bollocks or BS in the world of beer marketing. This is the only one that's a little more than a year old, but a fun case study.
Let's begin with Super Bowl 48.
Super Bowl 48.
The average 30-second spot's going for a whopping $4 million, $134,000 a second.
The big game, the biggest marketing event in America, and an even bigger beer drinking event, which is why Newcastle Brown Ale wanted to make a huge impact in the game. We just forgot one thing. We didn't have the money or the rights to be anywhere near the game. We couldn't even use the word s***hole. But instead of sulking, we decided to call bollocks on the whole big game thing altogether, creating a campaign about the big game ad we would have made if we had the money. This is the story of the mega huge ad Newcastle would have made, if we could have. We started just like any mega hype big game ad, releasing teasers and trailers for the ad we would have made.
Battle apes, party sharks, friendship.
Then, we researched our concept with real focus groups and released a film with their real reactions.
What do you think of Newcastle now?
Feels a little desperate.
This ad is pretty hilarious.
This ad is not hilarious.
Like, what the hell's going on?
And we revealed videos of the mega huge stars that would have been in our mega huge ad. Big game champion Keyshawn Johnson.
And why would they even draw this up?
An Academy Award nominated actress, Anna Kendrick.
Newcastle Brown Ale, the only beer that ever promised me a high-paying role in a commercial and then backed out at the last second like a bunch of
We released a new piece each day in the 10 days before the game, and it took off.
Anna Kendrick's not a Super Bowl spoof for Newcastle Ale also going viral.
They wanted to make a commercial about how they couldn't afford to make a commercial.
But it's spirited, it's spunky,
Yeah.
I like it. Let's take a look at this Newcastle ad.
It's a fake Super Bowl spot that's never airing, that's online, and all the prep that goes for it. So, I mean, there's a lot of back to it. It's really brilliant.
And days before the game, as other brands released their big spots online, we released the mega cheap storyboard for the mega expensive ad we would have made.
The power of partying destroys a robot like boff.
Then came the game itself. We took advantage of the fact that most ads leaked days before the game, and we created even mega-er versions of other brands' big game day ads, and tweeted them out minutes after the real ads aired. In the end, we received 600 organic media placements, earning 10 million views in just 2 weeks, and over 1 billion total impressions. The commercial we would have made nearly every major media outlet's big game top 10 list. The first time ever for a commercial that didn't actually run in the big game. And if that wasn't enough, it was the #1 trending topic on Facebook for 2 days, ahead of even the big game itself, proving you don't have to be in the big game to win the big game.
So again, a different tone for a different target audience, but again, this rooting in what is the action that we want people to take that goes beyond just an advertising context. What is the real world influence that we want to achieve, and getting people to reconsider what advertising is was quite meta, but the right thing to do to get a tiny brand with no media spend a real voice within culture. Lastly, and I'm conscious of the time here, a very, very different tone, a very, very different client, the Clinton Foundation, who spend a lot of money doing a lot of research to understand the progress that women are making in society globally. And they came to us to say, we have all of this data, but how do we get people to read and interact with the data to see the state of where women are globally? And so they downloads and research reads was the business metric. But when we actually went through the data and saw that the status of where women isn't far enough. Yes, we've made a lot of progress, but we haven't made enough progress. Our influence metric became, we think that people should be up in arms and actually protest the state of where women are. And so our influence metric was to cause more riots, and we did see a lot of protests around this, but that was the inspiration that we needed to jolt people into reading this data to understand where women actually are. This is the case study.
The Clinton Foundation's No Ceilings Report is a massive collection of data on the progress women and girls have made in the last 20 years. Almost 1 million stats on health, education, safety, and more say that despite some gains, gender equality has not been achieved in the US or abroad. We wanted young Americans to explore the data. There was just one hurdle. They don't think inequality is a problem. If we wanted them to engage with the report, we needed them to understand the truth. When it comes to gender equality, we're not there yet. On International Women's Day, we hijacked the media people see every day and turned it into a message they couldn't ignore. In an unprecedented and colossal effort, the world's most powerful brands, leaders, and icons came together to transform New York City overnight, removing women from the media and replacing them with a URL, notthere.org.
Some of the most iconic female faces in the world are missing, gone from the front covers of glossy magazines, wiped out from their billboards.
Some of the top brands and magazines yanked women from their ads.
Look at that, self, a blank page.
In New York City, women simply disappeared.
It really had everybody talking.
Dominated social trends all day, from India to Turkey and Colombia.
Celebrities including Cameron Diaz and Lupita Nyong'o changed their profile pictures to this avatar that symbolizes how women are not there in terms of gender equality.
Thousands of women and men
replace their social media pictures with blank silhouettes.
All this social buzz drove people to notthere.org, where 5 famous women were not there to tell you about the report. From there, you could dive deeper into the data or take immediate action. Within hours of the launch, Not There dominated every newsroom and social feed, making it the #1 trending campaign on International Women's Day. But the best part? Hundreds of thousands of people spent time learning the data, proving the world is ready for a change.
We're not there yet, but together we can be.
That's the bulk of the case studies that we're going to go through today. I think the thing that unifies all of these cases is that influence metric drove and inspired what we actually created. It wasn't just around hitting a score, getting a green light, being allowed to press play and proceed, but giving creative people what we're actually trying to achieve in the real world as a benchmark for their success inspires them to take non-traditional, integrated paths and try and find different ways of reaching people in places where they're actually going to be open to hearing from you and receptive to your message and willing to take action. You know, advertising can fall on deaf ears. Most of the time, more than 90% of it is terrible. How can we, when we're rooting in what are we trying to achieve in the real world, it allows people to create things that people will actually want and welcome into their lives. And being able to measure that and quantify that to inspire people has been super helpful for our creative people back at the ranch. So that's what I got. Thanks very much.